When does a crime turn into a conspiracy? This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. Well, as a storytelling guy, I've heard a lot of stories, and we see a lot of movies where they talk about conspiracies, and we kind of throw around that term. But you're saying that there's some kind of legal definition to a conspiracy, right?
Right. It's when two or more people agree to commit a crime and an overt action by one or both of those individuals actually occurs.
So it's two parts then, the agreement and then the committing of the crime. What's maybe an example, a really simple example of how that might differ from just an everyday crime?
Sure, if you have someone who's charged with distributing an illegal controlled substance. So if that person had any help in obtaining the illegal controlled substance, that is, say they had another individual that they agreed with to go and get the drugs in another state and bring them back to the town they both live in, and then that individual took the drugs and sold parts of them to individuals in the community. That would be a conspiracy between those two individuals to distribute the illegal controlled substance. And that's probably what we see the most of when it comes to conspiracies.
Okay, so that's really interesting because that's sort of a very small scale example of a conspiracy, but we hear this term, being talked about in the press for really high-ranking government officials being, charged with things, and it's always a little confusing, like they're charged with these crimes, but maybe it's a conspiracy, and is this exactly the same legal standard that's applied to that?
Yes, it is, and, one of the examples that's recently gotten some attention in the news is when the former FBI director, James Comey, is accused of perjuring himself in front of Congress and obstructing justice. Now, if he gets convicted of these two crimes, it's going to be much easier for the government than to build a conspiracy case against not only him, but any other actors that may have been involved in the whole reason behind him perjuring himself and obstructing justice. So it's the potential to open up a can of worms and really get a lot of high-ranking government officials charged with this criminal conduct.
And I suppose the same exact thing will apply. So if he ends up getting convicted and this door gets open to the conspiracy and these other people start to then be, charged with things, they're going to have to prove that there was an agreement among them and that someone actually took steps to commit crimes. Is that right?
So what it would go back to is a potential case where Comey's proven to have lied to Congress under oath or conspired to mislead investigators in the oversight of the investigation that was called Crossfire Hurricane. And so that whole investigation involved a lot of high-ranking government officials, and if he is found to be guilty of lying under oath and, also obstructing in this investigation, then all the other actors are on the line or on the hook to be charged.
So what is the penalty? What's the consequence or sentence for a conspiracy anyway?
Well, in James Comey's instance, it would, first of all, you'd look at the perjury charge, and that is up to 5 years in jail. Oh, okay. I was looking at you, not the camera. Okay, in James Comey's case, you would look, first of all, at his perjury conviction, which is up to 5 years in prison. And then if you were convicted of obstructing, that's up to 20 years in prison. And if he's convicted of conspiracy and, all of his co-conspirators are also convicted, that's punishable by, again, up to 5 years in prison. So, he's looking at those 3 charges, if there's just one count of each, of, 30 years in prison.
That's a lot of time in prison. And for the co-conspirators, it would be all whatever their case results in. But a lot of people could end up with a lot of prison time. And I think it's interesting that it's the same standard that applies to somebody who's simply conspiring with, like you say, maybe some drugs. But it applies the same way all the way up at that level.
Yes, and I will note, if you are involved in a drug conspiracy, the penalties are much steeper. So.
Okay, well, if someone needs your help with something like that, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure, we'll include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.